Hello everyone. So this is a continuation class of the topic which I started in the previous class. In the last class, we saw about corticosteroids, yet another chapter from hormone section. And then we saw why the name corticosteroid is given. It is because of the steroidal structure, which is cyclohexane and cyclopentane ring. And then because it is released from the cortex part of adrenal gland, it is known as corticosteroid. In corticosteroid, we saw the ACTH, the structure activity relationship of ACTH, the how ACTH is formed. Then also we saw the mechanism of action of ACTH and corticosteroids. We saw the pathway, synthetic pathway, and how cortisol and aldosterone are formed. Then we saw the regulation of this release of cortisol or aldosterone. Then we saw the classification of the various drugs which comes under corticosteroid chapter, or which are corticosteroid, and that classification is based on the duration of action, the plasma half-life. Then most importantly, we started with the pharmacological actions of corticosteroid. In that, we could finish effect on the carbohydrate metabolism, effect on the protein metabolism, and effect on the lipid profile, lipid metabolism. Then also we saw the effect of corticosteroid, mainly the mineralocorticoid on the electrolyte balance. Then on the organ system, we saw the effect on the cardiovascular system. In this class, we will extend the pharmacological action and we will see the effect of corticosteroid on different organs and tissues. What are the adverse effects related with the mineralocorticoid and glucocorticoid? Where all the corticosteroid can be used and how? Then we will see what are the drugs which blocks the effects of, which blocks the action of glucocorticoid or mineralocorticoid. So to start with, we have effect on skeletal muscle. Now, there is an optimal concentration required for the proper functioning of the skeletal muscle. So any alteration in the concentration, any alteration in the concentration of the glucocorticoid or mineralocorticoid may lead to improper functioning of the skeletal muscles. When the person feels weakness and fatigue, that's a clear-cut indication of Addison's disease, where there is the deficiency of corticosteroid, the release of the corticosteroid. In case of primary aldosteronism also, when there is increased concentration also, increased release also, there also muscle weakness can be seen, but that is due to hypokalemia. That is mostly because of hypokalemia. In case of glucocorticoid excess, which may happen because of the treatment with glucocorticoid, or maybe because of the more endogenous release of the cortisol. So their glucocorticoid excess may happen, and then it will show skeletal muscle wasting. And this is called as steroid myopathy. Skeletal muscle wasting because of the increased glucocorticoid, maybe because of the use of the drug, or the increased release of the cortisol will lead to steroid myopathy. So optimal concentration is required for the proper functioning of the skeletal muscle. Moving on to central nervous system. Now, as I told in the previous class only, that the corticosteroid has wide action. it affects almost all organ and all tissues of body. So the central nervous system is not the exception. This is also affected by the level of the glucocorticoid or mineralocorticoid. And the effect can be seen through indirect way or through direct way. Indirect way or indirect effect is mostly through the effect on the blood pressure. We have already seen that it affects the electrolyte balance and does affect the blood pressure also. So effect on BP indirectly affects the central nervous system. We also have already seen the effect of glucocorticoid on the glucose level and the effect of mineralocorticoid on the electrolyte level. So these effect on glucose and electrolyte will indirectly affect the central nervous system. Now, what are the direct effect? Direct effect, in case of adrenal insufficiency, the person may manifest with apathy, depression, irritability, and psychosis. These conditions can be decreased by giving of the glucocorticoid. And then symptomatic relief may appear by giving glucocorticoid. That causes mood elevation. But many patients may exaggerated effect of glucocorticoid treatment in this condition and may manifest with mania, insomnia, restlessness, increased motor activity, anxious, depressed, and overtly psychotic behavior can be seen. Now, the clear-cut mechanism is not known, but a proposed mechanism or hypothesis is there that why there is effect on central nervous system, direct effect on central nervous system. Now, neurosteroids are present in CNS, which may be regulated by the corticosteroid, the glucocorticoid, and the mineralocorticoid. And these neurosteroids may regulate the neuronal excitability. So when the neurosteroid is affected by glucocorticoid, then it may affect the neuronal excitability also, and thus CNS is affected. Next, coming on to blood. Now we will see both the condition what happens in case of Cushing syndrome when there is the excess of cortisol release or the corticosteroid, and we will see the effect when there is adrenal insufficiency. So there is polycythemia is seen in this condition in Cushing syndrome, where there is a very little effect on the hematocrit value and hemoglobin. There is a decreased level of lymphocyte or decreased mass of lymphoid tissue. Upon glucocorticoid administration, the effect can be divided into two ways. The glucocorticoid administration will decrease the number of things and will increase the number of things. So the things which are decreased are the number of circulating lymphocytes, then the number of eosinophils, the number of monocytes, and the basophils. They are all decreased. What will increase? There will be polymorphonuclear leukocyte. There will be increased release from bone marrow and decreased removal from the circulation. So decreased removal or increased release will cause polymorphonuclear leukocyte. Coming to what happens in adrenal insufficiency when there is lesser release. Normocytic anemia may be seen. Increased mass of lymphoid tissue may be seen, which is just opposite to that of Cushing syndrome. So increased mass of lymphoid tissue and lymphocytosis may be seen in case of adrenal insufficiency. Moving on, a very important pharmacological action of corticosteroid, which is anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressive action. Now, why I am saying that this is the most important pharmacological action? This I am saying because of this property only, the corticosteroid are much in use, are widely prescribed. For every other condition, when you want an acute suppression of the manifestation and symptoms, then the corticosteroids are given. So this is the main reason why corticosteroids are widely prescribed. So it prevents or suppress inflammation, which may occur because of any reason. It can be radiant, mechanical, chemical, infectious, or immunological stimuli. So any stimulus like immunological, infection, chemical, mechanical, and radiant, if it produces some inflammation, then the corticosteroids are given to suppress the inflammation. So these mediated inflammation can be suppressed by using the corticosteroid. But mark it, this has palliative effect. That means it will not affect the root cause. It will not cure the root cause of the disease. It will just suppress the symptom. And that is the most dangerous thing. If the root cause is not known and then you keep on suppressing the manifestation of the symptoms, then there will be worsening of the root disease. And that is the reason why the corticosteroid administration should be justified. Prescription should be justified. It is used for treating disease that results from the humoral immunity or the cellular immunity. There are undesirable immune reactions, and that can be divided into humoral immunity and cellular immunity. So the range from humoral immunity like urticaria and then cellular immunity, that is transplantation rejection. In these all cases, the corticosteroids are used. Coming to the mechanism of action of the anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressive action of the corticosteroid. Now, as we already know, the various procedure or the various pathway which ultimately cause the inflammation. So keeping that thing in the brain, we'll understand the mechanism. Now there are many mediators which are released when we get hurt or when there is some trauma, and that mediator will cause the pain and inflammation. So the corticosteroid helps to tackle down those mediators. So it decreases the release of vasoactive and chemotactic factors. Then it diminishes the secretion of lipolytic and proteolytic enzyme. These all mediator will cause the inflammation, right? Then decreased extravasation of leukocyte to area of injury. So this movement of leukocyte is decreased, extravasation is decreased. Then there is decreasement of fibrosis. Then there is reduced expression of cytokine and cyclooxygenase and nitrous oxide synthase. Now, as we already know the function of cyclooxygenase and nitrous oxide synthase, they are responsible for the formation or synthesis of mediator, prostaglandin and all, which causes inflammation and pain. So that glucocorticoid and corticosteroid reduces the expression of these enzymes. There is effect on lymphocyte number, immune system. It reduces pro-inflammatory mediators like macrophages, monocyte, endothelial cells, basophils, fibroblasts, and lymphocyte. So a long list of mediators are inhibited by corticosteroid. Now coming on to calcium balance. There is decreased calcium uptake in the gut because of corticosteroid and increased calcium excretion by kidney. So there is decreased level of calcium in the extracellular fluid. Now we have finished with the pharmacological action of the corticosteroid. Now we are moving on to pharmacokinetic parameters. As we already know, the pharmacokinetic is all about the absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. So it is ADME, ADME, right? So absorption is there. The corticosteroid are well absorbed, and because of good absorption, these are available in all sort of preparation. So oral preparation is available, parenteral preparation is available, the local preparation is available, the inhalational preparation is available. So all sort of doses form are available for corticosteroid. Now, when we give corticosteroid, glucocorticoid orally or parenterally, then we know that there is systemic absorption, and then systemic effect is given. Can there be systemic absorption or systemic effect when the corticosteroid is given locally? Yes, it can. So we will see how. From local side, when the administration is prolonged time, when you are applying a cream or a topical preparation for a prolonged period, more than 3 months, 4 months, then there is a chance of systemic effect also. Or if the site is covered with occlusive dressing, then also more of absorption may be there and then systemic effect can be seen. Or when a large area is exposed, when you are applying the corticosteroids in a large area, then also there may be a systemic absorption and thus systemic effect can be seen. And this systemic effect include the suppression of HP axis also. So systemic action may not only be on the organ tissue, it may affect the HP axis itself also. So that is very important thing. If you think that local application will not give systemic effect, then mind it. It can give if the administration is prolonged, if the site is covered with occlusive dressing, and if the area is quite large, then systemic effect including HP axis can be seen with the glucocorticoid or corticosteroid preparation. So coming on to transport, metabolism and excretion. More than 90% of the cortisol binds with protein, and two specific protein, the corticosteroid binding globulin CBG, this we have already seen in the mechanism of action. So the 90% of the cortisol binds either with this globulin or this albumin, and thus only a fraction can enter the cell. The corticosteroid binding globulin, the globulin has higher affinity but lower binding capacity, whereas albumin is having lower affinity but higher binding capacity. So we see here the same thing. Corticosteroid binding globulin has relatively high affinity for cortisol, mind it's glucocorticoid, and some of its synthetic container, but low affinity for aldosterone and gluconide conjugated steroid metabolite. Those are found mainly in the free form. So clearly we can say that corticosteroid binding globulin or the globulin part has higher affinity for cortisol and not for aldosterone. It has higher affinity towards cortisol and lower affinity towards aldosterone. Then how they are metabolized? Metabolism of steroid hormones can be in two ways. The first is the addition of oxygen or hydrogen atom followed by conjugation. Now this process in turn will form the water soluble derivative and then can easily be excreted out. One important reason for metabolism is converting water insoluble compound to water soluble compound so that it can be easily excreted out. So this is done by addition of oxygen or hydrogen atom followed by conjugation. The another method of metabolism is reduction of 4,5 double bond. In the last class I showed the structure. So reduction of the 4,5 double bond occurs at hepatic and extrahepatic site, and this converts to inactive compound, which is then excreted out. Now coming on to the very important part of this, which is toxic phase. toxicities. As I told, the effect, the corticosteroid has wide effect and it has effect on almost all part of the body. So when the effect will be mostly on the part of the body, there is the chances that the toxicity will also be there in all the parts of the body. So we can see the adverse effect like psychiatric adverse effect, the skin and soft tissue side effects like acne, hirsutism, edema, then the neurological side effect like neuropathy, pseudomotor cerebri, then cardiovascular like hypertension that happens mostly because of the aldosterone action, then the osteoporosis, then myopathy, then endocrine related adverse effect like diabetes like condition, adrenal cortex suppression, then immunological adverse effect like lymphocytopenia, immunosuppression, false negative skin test, ophthalmic like cataract, narrow angle glaucoma, and development like growth retardation may be seen in case of toxicity. Don't worry, I'll be discussing the adverse effects in detail in the subsequent slides. Now the toxicities can be divided into two forms. Toxicity which appears because of the withdrawal of the therapy, and the toxicity which arises from the supraphysiological dose of the corticosteroid. We will see it one by one. So what are the toxicities which occurs because of the withdrawal of therapy? This is flaring up of the underlying disease. As I told in the beginning only that the corticosteroid has palliative effect. That means it will not affect the root cause of the disease. It will suppress. So there may be a worsening of the disease. So that is known as flare up of the underlying disease. There can be acute adrenal insufficiency that happens mainly when there is a prolonged treatment due to corticosteroid. When there is a prolonged treatment, that HPA axis is suppressed. How it is suppressed? No, the HPA axis, the pituitary, the hypothalamus are the organs. They are the main system which causes the release of cortisol. Right. So when you are taking a drug or glucocorticoid, mineralocorticoid, or corticosteroid from outside, then the body is dependent on the exogenous administration of the drug, and that's why the HPA axis is suppressed, and it do not release the cortisol or aldosterone, and the recovery from this may take weeks to months. The characteristic glucocorticoid withdrawal therapy, when you suddenly withdraw the glucocorticoid, the HPA axis is already suppressed, then you can see the symptoms like fever, myalgias, arthralgias, and malaise. Pseudomotor cerebri can also be seen, which is a rare toxicity, and there is increased intracranial pressure with papilledema. That is pseudomotor cerebri. It's a rare toxicity, but can be seen on prolonged administration of corticosteroid. Next is toxicities at supraphysiological dose. Supraphysiological dose means which is more than the required amount which is suitable for the proper functioning of the human body. So at supraphysiological doses, we see there is electrolyte abnormalities, and that may result in hypertension, and it may affect the fat redistribution, hypokalemic alkalosis. This happens mostly because of the effect of mineralocorticoid. Whereas fat redistribution, we have already seen the buffalo hump and the moon face and all in the previous class. So that can be seen through glucocorticoid effect. Next is metabolic. Hyperglycemia because of the effect on the carbohydrate metabolism. So hyperglycemia can be seen. It can be associated with glycosuria. Diet and insulin diet restriction or insulin can be given to tackle down this. Immune system, glucocorticoid, it increases the susceptibility to infection. Glucocorticoid causes increase in the susceptibility to infection because of inflammation. There is risk of reactivation of latent tuberculosis. When a known infection is there, then and you need to give glucocorticoid, then there should be appropriate and effective antimicrobial or antifungal therapy and that can be given along with glucocorticoid. Or better to say, this glucocorticoid is given along with antimicrobial and antifungal therapy in case of known infection, and only if necessary. Coming on to effect on GIT, there may be a peptic ulcer. So peptic ulcer is one important adverse effect at supraphysiological doses. This happens maybe because of decreased protective mechanism, decreased synthesis, decreased formation, decreased release of the protective mechanism like PGE2 and PGI2. So the corticosteroid should not be taken with the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. There may be a chance of myopathy. We have already seen in the skeletal muscle effect on the skeletal muscle. There is weakness of proximal limb muscle, sufficient severity to impair ambulation, and when it happens, that means you have to withdraw the therapy. When there is impaired ambulation, that means you need to withdraw the therapy. Steroid myopathy of the respiratory muscle can be seen in patients with asthma or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. For behavior, there may be nervousness, insomnia, and overt psychosis. Cataract may also appear, and it is much related with the dose and duration of the therapy. If the dose is more, the duration is less, or the dose is more, the duration is also more, then cataract may appear, and this may not subside even if you withdraw the therapy. In continuation with the adverse effect at supraphysiological dose, the next comes is very important, which is osteoporosis, and that is seen mostly at the trabecular bone, ribs, and vertebrae of about 30 to 50% patient who takes the corticosteroid for prolonged period, then they may appear with osteoporosis, and the affected bones are mostly the trabecular bone, ribs, and vertebrae. Now, this osteoporosis can happen because of many reasons. There is decreased bone density. There is decreased bone density, and this happens because of inhibition of gonadal steroid hormone. Inhibition of gonadal steroid hormone, which we have already seen that it has positive effect on the bone density. As well as there is decreased gastrointestinal calcium absorption. We have seen how the calcium is absorbed through gastrointestinal tract in the parathyroid hormone section. Also, it will affect on the bone formation. There is suppressive effect on osteoblast. Osteoblast is suppressed where there is, but there is the stimulation of osteoclast. This also we have seen in parathyroid hormone. So when osteoclastic activity is increased and the osteoblastic activity is decreased, then it may lead to osteoporosis. Then the glucocorticoid inhibit the intestinal calcium uptake. It inhibits the intestinal calcium uptake, which may lead to secondary increase in parathyroid hormone. So if you remember the pathway, when the intestinal calcium or uptake is decreased, that means the calcium sensing is less, the occupancy is less, that means there is more of release of parathyroid hormone. And if there is more of release of parathyroid hormone, as we already know that parathyroid hormone causes bone resorption. So again here there will be bone resorption and the risk of osteoporosis will increase. So these three reasons are there. The first, because of the decreased GIT calcium absorption, bone density is decreased. Then the effect of osteoblast activity is decreased and osteoclastic activity is increased. The osteoclastic activity may be increased because of one reason. When there is decreased calcium uptake, that will cause increased release of parathyroid hormone, and that parathyroid hormone will cause a resorption through osteoclastic activity. So how to prevent osteoporosis? The glucocorticoid therapy, when given at the dose of 5 mg per day for more than 3 months, 3 months of duration, let's say prednisone, if given at this dose for more than 3 months, then there is an indication of bone densitometry. So you need to assess the bone densitometry. You need to assess the bone density through this symptometry test, and you have to keep it. Bone loss mainly occur within the first 6 months of the therapy. So this evaluation is more important, especially in the lumbar spine and hip and trabecular bone. So what are the prophylactic measures which may prevent this osteoporosis when you are on long-term corticosteroid treatment? Diet calcium of 1500 milligram per day should be taken, and then there is vitamin D should also be taken with at the dose of 800 international units. Sorry, it's wrong. It's 800 international unit per day. It's not 88. It should be 800 international unit per day. Also, bisphosphonate like risedronate and zoledronate can be given, which inhibits the osteoclastic activity and which causes the apoptosis of osteoclast, which we have already seen in the parathyroid hormone section. Next important part is osteonecrosis. This is also called avascular or septic necrosis. What are the affected part? The affected parts are mostly the femoral head, but the humeral head or the distal femur can also be affected. What are the symptoms in osteonecrosis? There is joint pain, there is stiffness, mainly in the hip, shoulder, and knee. It can also occur, the osteonecrosis can also occur when you give higher dose for short period. So see, the small dose for longer period or the more dose for the longer period obviously will cause all these adverse effects. But the high dose for short period may cause osteonecrosis. And treatment usually requires the joint replacement. Ultimately, joint replacement is needed for this case. In case of growth also, we have already seen that how it is very much, the corticosteroid is very much useful for the proper growth of a person. So when there is alteration in the corticosteroid and all, then there may be a growth retardation. So last 4 or 5 slides we discussed all the adverse effects. Now adverse effects of corticosteroid are very important for examination part. Now coming to therapeutic uses, these corticosteroids are given as a replacement therapy. In case of when there is lesser of release of cortisol or aldosterone. So we can say that corticosteroids are used as replacement therapy in case of adrenal insufficiency. And this adrenal insufficiency may occur because of primary reason and the secondary reason. The primary reason it will be called as primary insufficiency. For secondary reason it would be called as secondary insufficiency. The primary insufficiency occurs because of structural or functional lesion of the adrenal cortex. When the problem lies on the gland itself, which releases the cortisol or the corticosteroid, then it would be called as primary insufficiency. When the reason is either anterior pituitary or hypothalamus, then it is called as secondary insufficiency. The other places where these are used as replacement therapy are adrenalectomy, bilateral adrenal hemorrhage, AIDS, neoplastic infiltration of the adrenal gland, disorder of steroidogenic enzyme. So these are the other criteria, other situation where you need to give corticosteroid for replacement therapy. Now there can be acute adrenal insufficiency and there can be chronic adrenal insufficiency. We will see how the acute adrenal insufficiency is tackled through glucocorticoid or mineralocorticoid or both, and we will also see how chronic adrenal insufficiency is tackled by giving the corticosteroid. So first we will see what are the causes for acute adrenal insufficiency. This may happen because of the disorder of adrenal gland, which we have already seen in the previous slide. Adrenal gland, not the disorder of pituitary or hypothalamus. or it can happen because of the abrupt withdrawal of glucocorticoid. So acute adrenal insufficiency can occur by two ways. The first is disorder of adrenal gland, or when you abruptly withdraw the glucocorticoid if the person is already on the treatment with the glucocorticoid. In that case, acute adrenal insufficiency may occur, and that can be manifested by nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, dehydration, hyponatremia, hyperkalemia, weakness, lethargy, and hypotension. If you analyze each adverse effect, you can see that there is a strong relation with the pharmacological action of corticosteroid. And then how you will manage this acute adrenal insufficiency? It can be managed by giving IV isotonic sodium chloride solution with 5% of glucose. And then hydrocortisone is given at the dose of 100 milligram intravenous bolus, and then can be maintained with 50 to 100 milligram every 8 hours infusion. Then 25 milligram every 6 to 8 hours can be given. If there is unconfirmed acute adrenal insufficiency, 4 milligram of dexamethasone sodium phosphate can be given to treat. Next is chronic insufficiency. This happens when there is a plasma level, when the ACTH level is lesser than 100 picogram per ml, then the plasma level monitoring is very much essential. The manifestations or the symptoms are similar, but they are of less severity. Can be tackled with hydrocortisone with the dose of 20 to 30 milligram per day, or cortisone acetate given at the dose of 25 to 37.5 milligram per day. Now coming to important part, a regimen, how the corticosteroid should be given. Now different books says different, but there are three major regimen of giving corticosteroid. Taking the fact into consideration that it has the sleep-awake cycle, it has the effect due to biological clock. So the first regimen is the 2/3 of the dose is given in morning and 1/3 dose is given in the afternoon. This is done just to mimic the endogenous relief, as we already know that the maximum release is in the morning at 8 AM and then evening at 4 PM. So the more dose is given in the morning and then a little lesser dose is given in the afternoon. The second regimen is it should be given in the morning, one dose, and whatever you give in the morning, half of the morning dose you given at the lunchtime, and half of the morning again you give at the late afternoon. So half is given and half is given in the lunch, and half of the morning is given in the late afternoon. There are another hypothesis, the other regimen also which many doctors do account on, and that is the intermediate use of intermediate acting corticosteroid, which is prednisone, or long acting corticosteroid, which is dexamethasone. So you need not give the multiple doses. In case of primary adrenal insufficiency, fludrocortisone is also given, which is a mineralocorticoid at the dose of 0.005 to 0.2 milligram per day. Now coming to congenital adrenal hyperplasia. This will be abbreviated as CAH, capital C, capital A, and capital H, which is congenital adrenal hyperplasia. These are of two forms. The first is classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia, and the second is non-classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia. These are a genetic disorder where there is deficient steroidogenic enzyme. We have already seen the pathway through which the steroids are formed, and there are many enzymes involved in the formation of cortisol and aldosterone. So when there is deficiency in the steroidogenic enzyme, then that condition is called as congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Why hyperplasia? Because of the lesser enzyme, there is lesser formation of cortisol, like lesser level of cortisol. If you remember the pathway, lesser cortisol is formed when the lesser cortisol is formed, there is lack of negative feedback, is not there. Then there would be increased ACTH release. ACTH release will be intact, and there will be more ACTH release, and this will cause hyperplasia. So this is known as congenital adrenal hyperplasia. In case of classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia, there is severe defect in enzymatic activity, and this is first present in childhood. Non-classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia, this usually present after puberty with sign and symptoms of mild androgen excess like hirsutism, amenorrhea, and infertility. Can be treated or tackled with hydrocortisone at the dose of 0.6 milligram per kg, which is divided daily in 2 or 3 doses. Again, here fluorocortisone acetate at the given dose is prescribed. Now coming to uses in non-endocrine disease. So endocrinal disease we have already seen. Now the uses in non-endocrinal disease like rheumatic disorder, the SLE it is given. In case of vasculitic disorder like polyarteritis nodosa, Wegener granulomatosis, Church-Strauss syndrome, and giant cell arteries is given. Prednisone at 1 milligram per kg per day in divided doses can be given, along with methotrexate and cyclophosphamide. In case of rheumatoid arthritis, this is the figure. We have already discussed rheumatoid arthritis in detail in the respective chapter. So there you can see the abnormalities. Okay, there's deformation. Okay. Now rheumatoid arthritis, till the time of the starting of methotrexate, methotrexate is the disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drug. Methotrexate is very important for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. So till this methotrexate takes its action, prednisone at the dose of 5 to 10 milligram per day can be given. In case of osteoarthritis, here we see the osteoarthritis, then the synovial joint, the synovitis can be seen here. So in that, local application, local injection of steroid can be given. Renal disease, when there is increased excretion of the protein through urine, in there it can be given, which is called as a minimal change disease, MCD, or nil lesion, or nil disease, or liquid nephrosis. Prednisone at the dose of 1 to 2 milligram per kg for 6 weeks can be given. Allergic disease, another important criteria, another important indication of corticosteroid. So hay fever, serum sickness, urticaria, the contact dermatitis, the drug reaction, bee sting, angioneurotic edema. In these all type of allergic diseases, these corticosteroids has a place for the treatment. In severe form of allergic diseases, methylprednisolone at the dose of 125 milligram intravenously every 6 hours can be given to tackle. Next is bronchial asthma or other pulmonary condition. In case of severe asthmatic attack, the glucocorticoid can be given. So parenterate is given at a dose of 60 to 120 milligram. Methylprednisolone every 6 hours is given, and then can be shifted to prednisone at the dose of 30 to 60 milligram orally. And then slowly it should be tapered down. As I told, it should not be withdrawn rapidly. So taper down slowly over 10 days to 2 weeks, depending upon how long the patient was on the treatment. In case of less severe acute asthma, there is prednisone given at the dose of 30 to 60 milligram for 5 days. Then there are possibility, there are option of giving inhaled corticosteroid also. Then use of glucocorticoid antenatal. In case of premature birth, the glucocorticoid is given to decrease the respiratory distress. Respiratory distress is given. That the drugs given are betamethasone, dexamethasone in between 26 to 34 weeks of gestation. Infectious disease like AIDS with pneumocystis carinii, pneumonia, it increases oxygenation and lower incidence of respiratory failure. Haemophilus influenza type B meningitis. By giving this, it decreases neurological impairment. Skin diseases like eczematous eruption, 1% hydrocortisone is given in ointment form. Acute dermatological disorder and exacerbation of chronic disorder, 40 milligram per day of prednisone is given. Pemphigus is also given where there is blister, watery blister. There is 120 milligram of prednisone can be given to treat it. Gastrointestinal tract related uses. In case of chronic ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, there is a place of giving corticosteroid. So hydrocortisone 100 milligram, retention edema can be given in case of mild type of ulcerative colitis. Severe acute exacerbation, there is oral prednisone can be given at the dose of 10 to 100 milligram per day. When the person is severely ill, fever, anorexia, anemia, in case that 40 to 60 milligram prednisone can be given per day. Budesonide can also be a safer alternative. In case of malignancy also, organ transplantation also, myasthenia gravis also, it has a place. Malignancy, anti-lymphotic effect, acute lymphocytic leukemia and lymphomas, in this case is given. During organ transplantation to prevent the organ rejection, prednisone at high dose of 50 to 100 milligram can be given. And myasthenia gravis also, it has a place. Then sarcoidosis, which is generally an inflammatory condition of lungs and lymph nodes. There also prednisone can be given. Thrombocytopenia, again prednisone at 0.5 milligram per kg, which decreases the bleeding tendency. In case of spinal cord injury, large dose of methylprednisolone, sodium succinate 30 milligram per kg initially, followed by an infusion of 5.4 milligram per kg per hour for 23 hours should be given. Now enough of the corticosteroid. Now let's see what are the inhibitor of the biosynthesis or inhibitor of the action or inhibitor of the effect of adrenocortical steroid. The first is aminoglutamide, and this proper compound inhibits the enzyme CYP11A1. Hope you remember this enzyme, the pathway. 11A1, which is a rate limiting step, which convert, we'll see in the next slide. Okay. So there is production of all classes of steroid hormone is impaired. So there is no steroid hormone which is impaired. All are impaired. Also, it also inhibits CYP11B1 and the enzyme aromatase, which convert androgen to estrogen. That is also inhibited. Where it is given in Cushing syndrome, secondary to autonomous adrenal tumor. Also, in case of hypersecretion associated with ectopic production of ACTH. So this is the enzyme which is inhibited by aminoglutamide. Next is ketoconazole. Ketoconazole is well-known antifungal drug, but it has the effect in inhibiting the adrenocortical hormone also. Higher dose inhibit the activity of CYP17 enzyme, which is an important enzyme for the formation of corticosteroid. It inhibits the adrenal and gonadal steroidogenesis. Even higher dose than higher inhibit the enzyme CYP11A also. In case of Cushing syndrome, it is given at a dose of 600 to 800 milligram per day, 2 divided doses. So CYP17 and CYP11A1. So CYP11A1 and then CYP17. These are inhibited because of ketoconazole. Next is metarapone. This relatively or selectively inhibit the enzyme CYP11B1. 11B1. So separate enzyme. You need to remember the enzyme, which is also called 11 beta hydroxylase. This inhibits the conversion of 11 deoxy precursor to cortisol and aldosterone. So mostly this is the last part when this causes the conversion to cortisol and aldosterone, and that enzyme is inhibited. This is very helpful in the diagnosis of the patient with Cushing syndrome. So the person with this syndrome is given this drug, and then morning if the level is decreased, then we can know that the person is having Cushing syndrome. Hypercorticism resulting from either adrenal neoplasm or tumor producing ACTH ectopically, it can be given. The next is mitoten, and then it has adrenocorticolytic effect, and it affects mainly the fasciculata and reticularis part. It also inhibits the CYP11A1, and we'll see there. So 11, the mid-tyrosine is 11, CYP11B1, CYP11B1. This one, cortisol and aldosterone are synthesized by the help of this enzyme. So that is inhibited by mid-tyrosine. Mitoten inhibits this particular enzyme. Antiglucocorticoids like mifepristone. This is a progesterone receptor antagonist and has anti-glucocorticoid activity also. At higher dose, mifepristone inhibits the glucocorticoid receptor and then blocks the feedback regulation of HPA axis and secondarily increase the endogenous ACTH and cortisol level. Inoperable cause of cortisol excess that have not responded to other agent, in that also mifepristone can be given. This is one multiple choice question. Please see to it. A 46-year-old male patient has Cushing syndrome that is due to the presence of an adrenal tumor. Which of the following drug would be expected to reduce the sign and symptom of this man's disease? So if you see, mostly all the drugs are corticosteroid itself. Only there is ketoconazole, which has the anti-glucocorticoid activity. And the reason we have already seen. So the answer would be ketoconazole. So that's it for today's class. Thank you so much.